So welcome. I am Michele Morris. I'm the Director of Outreach and Communications for the Chittenden Solid Waste District, and along with Dan Goossen, Director of Composting for CSWD, we're co-hosting this Zoom meeting, and we are joined by about, oh, I'm getting an echo. Everybody else okay? All right. We're joined here by about 30 key stakeholders, and it's really a testament to the engagement and interest that we have in our community on keeping food scraps and other things that don't need to go to the landfill out as much as we can, and we very much appreciate that. So we appreciate you making time out of your day to give us this time so that we can talk a little more about the drivers behind the recent announcement of a couple of weeks ago that we will no longer be accepting certain compostable products for composting at our facility. Dan, if you could advance this, please. So just some housekeeping or reminders about how to participate. We are recording this meeting so that we can capture everybody's questions. So we will provide an opportunity at the end of Dan's presentation, which is very, very short, for questions. So we welcome folks to raise your hand if you have a question to ask. You can do that by clicking on the chat box or the participants list, depending on the version of Zoom that you have, or you may click on the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen. And again, depending on the version you have, that will enable you to access the raise hand tool. If you're calling in by phone, you just need to press *9, and that will show us that you'd like to ask a question. So again, I would like to ask everybody to leave yourselves on mute, please, unless you are speaking. That will help us prevent feedback and unnecessary noise. We are going to capture all questions, not just in the video recording, but in the chat box. We'll be downloading those, and we're hoping to be able to answer some of the high-level big questions that we suspect folks have today, but mostly we're really hoping to hear more questions so that we can capture those, and we promise we will be going back after this Zoom, looking at all those questions, and by the end of February, we will be following up with an updated list of all questions we've received to date, along with answers that were not provided on the tools or the handouts rather, that we've already provided about this decision. I think that about covers it. Is there anything I missed from my colleagues? All right, then I'm going to turn it over to Dan Goossen, our Director of Composting, to walk us through the presentation. And thanks again for everybody for attending.
Thank you, Michele. And thanks again to everybody who's taking time today to join us. I know this has been probably a less than exciting piece of news to be receiving from us a couple of weeks ago about this change in material acceptance. So we felt it was really critical that you get a better understanding of what the drivers are for this decision, and to know, I'll probably say this a few times, but it was not one that we came to easily. So I'll be going over kind of our process and to give you a little bit of background about compost, and then again, at the end of that, hopefully you can save your questions to that point. We should have plenty of time to hear them and get back in touch the way Michele just described. So without further ado, if I can get this thing to cooperate. There we go. So this is a recap of what was in the email from a couple of weeks ago. And essentially the big change is that starting a year from now, in January 2022, we will continue to accept food scraps of any kind. We will continue to accept the liner bags that most of those, or a lot of those, come in from all of your locations and others. Coffee filters and tea bags still okay, as long as they're normal tea bags and not the plastic versions. Newspaper, untreated paper bags, also still okay. paper towels, napkins, and facial tissues if they do not contain bodily fluids or chemicals. And then wooden or bamboo stirrers, toothpicks, and chopsticks, also all acceptable. Finally, uncoated paper leaf bags, similar to the ones that are available commercially for your fall leaf pickup, also still acceptable. What's missing from there, of course, is the compostable food serviceware that many of you utilize today. So a little bit of background. This, for those of you who have not been to our facility and taken a tour, welcome you to do so. They're a little bit on hold during COVID times, but during normal years, we offer lots of tours and would encourage you to seek that out once it comes back online. So this is our aerated static pile compost facility, or the first portion of it. It was constructed in 2010, 2011, and it was, it's a new location in Williston compared to where we were at the Intervale, Burlington's Intervale. Some of you knew us back then as Intervale Compost. So that shift happened now a decade ago. And we've been making compost here all that time. And in the decade since we relocated to Williston, we've seen a huge increase in the amount of food waste. Markedly so in the last few years, certainly after the full implementation of Vermont's composting or universal recycling law, Act 148. But even prior to that, we're more than doubled the amount of food waste that we started getting as of a few years ago. Between 2010 and let's say 2015, the amount of food waste being handled at our facility doubled roughly. Excuse me. And the way we compost, essentially, for those of you who have not done the tours, we take in materials, we blend them up, we put them in these concrete bays. These are all aerated via troughs that are underground, and they go through several weeks of aeration followed by several months of windrowing. They get screened at the end, and what results is essentially the fine material that you're accustomed to as Green Mountain Compost, and then other material. We'll see what some of that other material looks like. If all goes well, this is the good stuff. This is the fine material that many of you purchase and put in your gardens and on your lawns. And that's where the magic happens, black gold. So the challenge with being a municipal composter and being any composter is really that what drives our process and why we've started composting originally was we have all this organic material. The majority of what we see in this picture is actually food waste that comes from cafeterias, that comes from grocery stores, comes from plate scrapings. And that's the stuff that we've known forever should not be in the landfill because it doesn't belong there. It belongs in the soil once it's been composted. If it's in a landfill environment, it creates methane gas, it leads to more greenhouse gases and so forth. So when we started the Intervale some 3 years ago, that was the driver. We had yard waste that needed to be dealt with, and we had food, and we knew that we did not want that going to the landfill. Over the years, we've seen more and more of the other things that are in this picture making up a good portion of the mix. So there's bags here. You can see there's different shades of bags. Some of those are undoubtedly compostable, certified compostable bags. There's probably some of those that are not. And you see a good mix of, food serviceware, plates, bowls, forks, knives, cups. And again, a lot of those are likely certified compostable. But invariably, somewhere in the mix when we get materials in are the non-compostable things, the plastics, the polystyrenes, the cutlery, containers, bags. It comes in every day in almost probably every load that we get in, with a few minor exceptions. We get some quantity of this. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's a little. And our biggest challenge is finding it, knowing that it's there, and knowing that it's indeed trash and not something that may actually compost. So you can see in this picture, it's pretty clear when it's all concentrated in one bag. We certainly remove that and put it to the landfill. But the challenge is that is usually intermingled throughout, and unlike the milk cartons or say like a foam cup, a lot of these materials look exactly like their certified compostable counterparts, which is a huge challenge, particularly at scale. So these are some of the familiar looking items. They look a lot like their traditional plastic and foam and fiber paper or plastic lined fiber counterparts. Actually, I'm gonna go back just a second. So the process is that we take this material, we blend it up with all the other ingredients, we aerate it, and then eventually at the end of the process, we screen it. Excuse me. So when this comes in, if you're a homeowner and you're dropping off food scraps, that's often a very small container, 5 gallons, maybe a little bit less. But most of the food that we get in comes in very large vehicles. This load was probably something in the order of 10 to 15 tons of material. We happen to see this bag floating on top, but generally there's so much material that based on the scale and the throughput of our facility and the conditions under which we have to operate, there's no way to see everything that's coming in all at once. Instead, it gets blended fairly quickly with the other components that we need for composting, and this type of material is lost until further on in the process. At the end of our screening process, we end up with a couple of different piles. So we basically have a big sifter. We have over the years, we've had different versions of this, but our screening equipment, basically everything goes in one end, and then the fine material comes out in one pile, and that is then aged and sold. And then the other portion is what we call overs. Overs is comprised of anything that you don't want, anything over a certain size. In this picture, you can see there's a fair amount of brown material in there. That's likely sticks and other stuff that has come in with the yard waste, but it's mixed very heavily with all those flecks of other non-brown material, which are largely plastic. There's one tarp in the mix, but much of it is plastic, either compostable or non-compostable, and this is a big issue. And it's been a growing issue it's always been an issue really since our early days at the Intervale. There was always plastic contamination, and then when we started adding certified compostable products, there was some degree of contaminants that came in that form as well. But we've seen it growing. We've seen it as the food waste has come in, particularly over the last couple of years. We've just seen a greater and greater concentration of non-compostable things, or things that we can't tell the difference of because they look the same. So talking to my staff who, be it on the front end when the food waste is coming in and they're doing that initial blending, or partway through when it's being aerated, or at the point of screening, or at the point of windrowing, or at the point of turning, we strive to pull out what we know is not compostable, and occasionally also some things that should be compostable but are not composting in time. So this was from 2 weeks ago. We were just finished processing some of our windrows and turning them, and this was the result of probably 2 or 3 hours of my staff going through and handpicking all of this trash. This is a regular occurrence and growing more and more steadily as time goes on. And it's not just plastics. This is familiar to some of you. This is one of the fiber products that comes through. We see huge quantities of these. This is probably from a cafeteria, and they're widely popular for good reason. They in the best circumstances, these could easily break down in compost and create a good soil amendment. However, that oftentimes that is not what occurs. They come in, even when they're not stacked like this, they will come in if they're isolated. Perhaps there's several bags of them, and they aren't fully broken up or spread out. And again, like this, sometimes they are stacked. Same with cups. And what happens is they will survive the initial aeration phase and mixing. They'll survive the second aeration phase and mixing fairly unaffected. This is probably a pile. This came from, I'm not sure exactly how long this was in the pile, so I'm confusing it with another picture, but they tend to roll out when they're stacked like this, particularly, and when they're on the outside of the pile, they can easily be confused as trash, and sometimes they're just end up in the landfill. So here's, that pile we saw in the bucket earlier. That was the result of these guys going through and picking. There's different methods we use to remove stuff from the active compost piles, but it's all arduous. It's not much fun. And here we're going to chance it and try to play a video. Apologies in advance if this crashes horribly, but this is from one windrow recently where I just took a video one side of the pile and down the other side of the pile, and you can see kind of what we're dealing with. So there's some fruit in there and some other compostable things that we would want in the compost mix, but you can see there's tons and tons of bags and bottles and packages and containers and some more fiber you'll see there, polystyrene, no doubt, some fiber trays, a lettuce bag I'm seeing. And it's a very diverse mix of the amount of contaminants that we deal with. Again, some of them certified compostable, some of them not, but the ability to differentiate between the two on our scale and throughput has gotten to the point where it's we're not able to do so, and it's affecting our final product quality. And here we'll get a glance at what it looks like going down the other side of this pile. So that's 300 yards of material. And by weight, that may not be a huge component, this material that's fallen out of the windrows, but by volume, it is not what we want to see in our compost. And it's very indicative of what we have been seeing for, and we don't need to see that again. So at the end of the day, this is what we're dealing with. This is, we get a complaint here or there over the years. I've been at this a long time, and, probably we've never had a full year. We sell thousands and thousands of cubic yards of finished product, and invariably we'll get a complaint about one thing or another, but the degree and quantity of complaints that we've been getting lately is reaching a point that is very uncomfortable, and we join the sentiment shared by this customer who filed this complaint last year. And we wonder about our ability to sell the compost moving forward unless we're able to get a handle on the contamination. And it may sound like plastics are the real problem here, but unfortunately, after many, we've been dealing with this and trying to figure this out for many, many months and years, really. And it's a combination. We've come to the conclusion that unless we change the status quo, we are not going to be able to get a handle on quality compost moving forward. And that is the end of that portion. I'm sure there are lots of questions, and we would be happy to try to answer some of them. I'll do my best about doing all of the compost process related questions. And then if there are other more general questions, Michele can try to take a stab at some of those. If there's specific questions about your circumstance and individual materials, we will probably try to compile those and get back to you, as Michele stated. But for now, I will stop talking for a moment and open up. I think Amy was keeping track of who had questions.
Yep, Dan, it looks like Eli is first.
All right.
Thanks. Hey, Dan. Hey, Amy. I'm Eli from Healthy Living Market and Cafe in South Burlington, and now we have a new store in Williston. So I've got just a quick statement and then a question. So, in our opinion, the reason you see plates, forks, and cups in your compost is that your industry went all in on the term compostable many years ago, and a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon. We have spent thousands of dollars over the years following this trend, both because we believe in sustainability and environmentalism and because our customers asked for it, mostly because they saw it trending in the news. We started buying compostable produce bags at a cost of nearly double, compostable containers in our cafes that we have promoted over the years as part of our mission and values to be an environmentally friendly company. And then we've paid Casella tons of extra money to haul these materials away, which was thrown into one container at the insistence of both Casella and CSWD. Now we have a situation on our hands where we have to walk it all back, and our customers are going to be upset. So we're customer facing, meaning our staff are the ones who bear the brunt of customer feedback and frustration, not CSWD. So the question is this: when our 30,000 customers in Chittenden County and beyond hear about this, how do we deal with their frustration? Is CSWD going to help with damage control?
Thanks. Yeah, I think my answer to that is certainly, I think our staff, we have a robust outreach and communication staff, and everyone along the way, when we've come to this conclusion over the past many months and debating, have been very, very vocal, saying that this is going to be a huge impact for a lot of people. Like all the customers you just described, no doubt. I don't doubt anything you just said in terms of how upset certain folks will be. Our hope is that, as we've heard from some folks, that they will understand. You know, it's helpful that I'm able to give this presentation to all of you, and certainly we can't do that to every individual in the county, but we hope that we will have lots of opportunities in this full year ahead to help explain some of this decision making and why it's important. And fortunately for us, we're not alone in this path. We're not pioneering, like just as we weren't pioneers when we took this material on. There are a lot of, well, by accepting it, we were in the minority. Most compost facilities in this country still do not accept these materials for a lot of the reasons that I explained. And also, there are other communities that have gone backwards, like the way that you phrased it. So they were taking them for a long time, and they have stopped taking it, where either the municipality or the community compost partner have decided that it's just untenable, and they walked it back. So we've been in communication with them to see what their experience has been like, and I think we will be able to bring those forward. But certainly, it's not going to be popular. We recognize that. It's not going to be easy. It's been very convenient. We appreciate that. The ability to dispose of these items and feel good about it is something that everybody in the industry, or in all of your institutions and all of your businesses, it's something that we're rocking the boat on. Perhaps.
If I may jump in here.
Sure.
I just want to respond to Eli and that question. I'm sure others have too. I'm Michele Morris, Director of Outreach and Communications. I just want to assure you that we will be reaching out to your 30,000 customers, not directly necessarily, we don't have that list, but to our entire constituents in the county, to let them know that this is a CSWD decision, not a Healthy Living or a Champlain Valley Expo or any one of our other numerous constituents and stakeholders who are here, that it was not your decision. It was a CSWD decision, and we'll be doing our best to explain the reasons behind that. And we do want to be partners with you. We understand the role we've played in helping you adopt these tools. Our outreach staff, who is on the team that I manage, has worked really hard. I've been a business outreach coordinator here and have been one of the people helping folks adopt using these tools. So we know that it's a big change and that there's going to be unhappy people, and we want to let our community know the role that CSWD plays in that and why. So I hope that answers your question, Eli. And we also want to partner with the haulers. I know there's some folks on this call from Casella who we know have been active in providing signage for some of their customers. And we play a role in that too. So changing signage, changing materials, and helping folks walk down that path over the coming months to make sure we can get you there in a way that works for you.
I really appreciate it. Just as much help as you can give us along the way. Of course, we want to keep being partners. We just need help and support. And if you're right there with us, communicating it at the same time, that's excellent.
That's our full intent. Thank you.
Dan, we have Tim from Champlain Valley Expo, and then Ken Spencer, and we also have some comments in the chat.
Yeah.
But Tim can go first.
Yeah, Tim Shea, Champlain Valley Expo. This is a tough one because we, like so many, have been following that 3 or 5 or 4 year plan that you folks have set out as far as starting with larger institutions, working your way down. And we too have invested in money in training and signage, et cetera. And it's unfortunate because, we in the event business have tried so much to kind of play by the rules and then have the rules change. And I understand, why, like, I'm not sure I understand. I guess I understand why, but I guess my question is, there was a lot of public input, I think, in developing the rules and guidelines. Was there ever public input sought for this change? Because it kind of caught us off guard.
Public input for I'm not sure the one that you're referring to.
This change right now, is there any, did you ask, how was the decision arrived at? Was it staff, or did you reach out to partners?
All right, I think you were talking about Act 148 originally. So, yeah, so this is our initial reach out, and obviously it's something that I can see from your perspective what you're saying. We felt like very strongly that we knew the importance of these materials, and we knew how hard this was going to be for folks, and yet the problem is so grave that we felt like this is something that we had to take. We didn't want to take this step. We've been working for very many years, working with these, knowing that they've been problematic, but they've gotten to the point where we realize that we just can't continue to move forward without making changes. And so
it's concerning as far as because I don't see it saying, hey, changing this, but every 6 months, what other changes are coming down the road? Because again, we'll make investments to make signage, training, etc. And then does that change again? And I guess it's a tough question to answer, but it helps for us to have some consistency and predictability as we move forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think with solid waste, we're seeing that the world is changing rapidly. Recycling, composting, the trends are very rapidly shifting, and can't promise that there won't be more changes down the road. We too like consistency and appreciate the need for that in decision-making and planning and budgeting and all of that. We've tried to make the reason we're not reaching out and saying, hey, starting next month, we're not taking these things, is because we recognize that it is a huge investment and a huge part of people's programs in their institutions. And we want to make sure that there's time to go through inventory, that there's time to budget for change, that there's time for us to work with you, our outreach staff, and come up with alternatives. But yeah, we recognize that it's tough, and appreciate all the trouble. I mean, all of the difficulty with adjusting to change, what seems like unending change. There's a lot of change, and we live in changing times, I guess. So
one last question, and I'll go on mute. So there was not any input from anyone out any partners. There's no.
So, Tim, I'll address that. So the input that we got was via our coordinators, our outreach team, and myself. So we working closely with folks like the Champlain Valley Expo and the other stakeholders here and the numerous others that we do. That was the conduit for the public input, frankly. It wasn't a public meeting, that sort of thing, because as Dan indicated, we knew that operationally, the change needed to happen, and the public input happened over the last months and years, really, from our staff bringing this to the table and having those conversations internally. And understanding the impact is why we did schedule it for a full year out. That was outreach staff saying, you cannot make this change to these folks that we've been working with for years without giving them ample time to adjust their planning and budgeting.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Dan, it's Rhonda. I'm just gonna unshare your screen so we can see everybody. Is that cool?
sure. Thanks.
Ken Spencer?
Hi, this is a step back from the kind of granular upfront experience of Tim and then the guy from Healthy Living. and I'm asking for just a little bit of history and understanding. So it seems like there's been some sort of big failure in this concept of compostable products. I just don't get exactly, how that happened. Can we have a little discussion of the history, or perhaps the future? I mean, how did things become certified compostable and nobody wants them in the compost community? And how can we kind of look ahead as the CSWD, like who's going to be the leader in terms of, to address Tim's question going forward, or what is the future? I just don't get what's going on. Why are they certified compostable?
Sure, that's a good question. So when we say that they're certified compostable, there are a few third-party entities that exist in the world, a few out of Europe. There's one main one in the United States called the Biodegradable Plastic Products Institute, I forget which one, called BPI. And if you look at the packaging on any of these materials that you buy in, a lot of them have that kind of swirl logo, and BPI, I think, is still in the middle of that. So they are the certifier that most of us are familiar with. And there was never any, like legislation. Now it's popping up in different places, but it was never driven by legislation or regulation, rather recognition that as the industry created these products starting 25 years ago, let's say, and initially there was a lot of confusion. There were a lot of, it was like the Wild West in terms of what was being produced. There were a lot of erroneous claims. There was a lot of greenwashing, and over time, it was BPI kind of stepped forward and said, actually, we think this industry is important. These products are important, but they need more regulation or more certification if composters are actually going to be able to take them, because from the get-go, there has been a huge hesitancy or reluctance for composters to take these things on. Like I said, we're in the minority of composters by having taken them, particularly as long as we have. So in the early days, for instance, I alluded to it being kind of an on and off again thing. We've taken compost liner bags for over 20 years now, I believe 15 to 20 years. But things like cutlery, we had a big issue with those about 12, 13 years ago, where we had hundreds of thousands of pieces of cutlery that all were stamped compostable. And it turns out that they had polypropylene in the mix and actually wouldn't break down. And there's been a lot of that over the years. And I'd say the last decade or so, that's improved, where the government has gotten involved and some of those bad players have been fined, and it's harder in the United States for folks to sell products that are labeled as compostable and have them actually not be compostable. Certified compostable means that they're following ASTM standards, that they reach a certain amount of degradation within a certain time frame. And of course, every compost facility is different, and they're not all going to meet that time frame. You're not going to get full degradation in compost site A that you would in compost site B. Everybody's different. So the challenge lies within this idea that industry came up with this. Compostable products industries came up with these products. They seem to fit a need. People want to have single-use disposable items that are not plastic, that don't think are going to the landfill and contributing to greenhouse gases. They want to be able to go back to the soil. They've had a huge success. It's taken a while, but now there's a huge demand by customers, residents, and the like, bringing these things on more and more. But what is not followed as quickly as the growth of the industry is the acceptance of these materials in compost facilities. So of the thousands and thousands of compost facilities across the country, it's still a minority that will take them, and it's because of these reasons. The liner bags, we pointed out in our communications that those are the exception to this rule because they are so critical. We found even from 20 years ago that the yuck factor that everybody's familiar with in diverting food scraps from trash or the landfill stream requires some amount of film. And so that we've realized I don't, you know, as the composter, I really don't want them in there either, but we realize that there's probably just no way to continue the program and continue diversion if those are not allowed. So that's where we landed on that one. But I don't know, kind of talking all over the place. Did that answer any of your questions around?
No, that's okay. Is the bottom line is that we need to educate the world that there's no such thing as a successful compostable piece of plastic? Should we go back to recycling?
So that's an excellent question. I think the notion that certified compostable products are the answer at the end of the day, that does need to be challenged. Obviously, we're challenging it a bit, but with this announcement, but you know, I don't know what the actual statistic is. I would guess that 95% of these products that are produced in the world end up in landfills, best case scenario, or maybe they're litter or something, but they don't end up in compost facilities and end up being composted. So that's a huge misconception. And I don't know whose fault it is that misconception exists. They're trying to work on it. I was involved in the last couple of weeks with planning workshops on a national level with BPI, this certification body, and a group of stakeholders on the national level, including many composters. And the discussions have been ongoing for a decade, for 2 decades. I've been involved for a decade, and it's an ongoing challenge. You know, they recognize that there's huge limitations in the marketplace and that points of disposal just do not exist. And they're trying to work on coming up with making improvements on what those hurdles are so that they can get them accepted in more places. But from my perspective, it is not the end all be all that we have more and more and more of these products that theoretically could break down in the ideal conditions in a willing compost facility location. There's too many ifs in there for it to really be impactful. In certain municipalities, it works okay, where the municipality, where there's a lot of details there, but for instance, San Francisco, they're widely used, widely accepted. Portland, Oregon, they are not. No, they're not used and not accepted. Both very forward, progressive thinking municipalities, both taking very different approaches. Right. The finished compost in each of those places, you'll probably see differences.
And I'd just like to add, I do want to recognize we do have other questions we want to get to, but Ken, in answer to when you said is recycling, we would love to have those conversations individually with various stakeholders who are looking at their options, because that might be a viable option in some areas to use recyclable products, but it won't necessarily be in every case just because of food contamination and things like that. But we do want to have those conversations with folks individually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, hitting up the chat box now. Allison from dealer.com had a question that they, the statement, but we were under the impression that it was okay to compost tissues if they had been used. Is this inaccurate?
So used tissues, I think this one we've batted around several times too. I think in the age of COVID, our thoughts are that if they have bodily fluids, it would be best to not put them in the compost facility or in your compost stream. And it's less like when they get into the mix that you saw mixed in with all that food waste, there's not a lot of concern. The problem is the transfer from the nose to the bin at your place of business, and then in the receptacle that is then being brought somewhere else. Or we've seen, for instance, in our food waste drop-off bins, people will just dump piles and piles of tissues, and then when somebody goes to close the lid on that, you'll get an influx of air and they flow up and then potentially land in your face. So that's kind of what we're trying to avoid. Do they compost? Absolutely. Are they fine in the finished product? Yes, it's the potential exposure along that pathway is what we're worried about. And in a post-COVID world, maybe we will revisit that. But for now, if we would request that if they've got chemicals or bodily fluids, including mucus, that they stay out of the compost.
Excellent. All right. So Joel from St. Mike says, would you recommend that facilities stop composting foodware now versus 2022?
As the composter receiving these, I would be thrilled if they all disappeared tomorrow. Yeah, because of all those reasons I said, you know, our compost quality would go up very quickly. We'd be able to see what is good, you know, what is food and what is not, what is allowable, what is not instantly. I don't have that expectation. We're very hopeful that in a year from now, we will see a huge shift in their product quality, and, you know, an immediate impact. But if you don't have a huge inventory and you're trying to decide what to do moving forward, and then yeah, absolutely, you can make that shift now.
All right, Corey from UVM asks, will you still accept pizza boxes that cannot be recycled due to food or grease contamination?
So those currently are also not on the acceptable list, and that's another tricky one. Again, fiber, cardboard makes it fine compost input, generally speaking. However, what we've come to find out is that a lot of these compost boxes have been lined with polyfluorinated compounds, and those can be of concern for other reasons, not the ones that we've gone through today, but you know, PFAS and all of that. There are fluorinated compounds that get added to fiber materials, particularly things that are likely to get wet, such as like a pizza box. And industry is working to come up with replacements that hopefully are less problematic and cause for concern. But until that point, we have added those to the restriction as well.
All right, and Kelton from Casella is asking, will tipping fees be changed by this?
I don't think tipping fees will be immediately changed by this. They're, you know, we revisit our tipping fees on a regular basis, and there's a lot of factors that go into making those determinations. We are in the midst of ongoing change, the influx of food, a lot more of it coming in, some of it being more problematic for the reasons we've discussed and for other reasons. There are other things at play, and there are other facilities opening up, and there's a chance that we will at some point have one of our anticipations and hopes is that by making this change, we can actually implement a contamination policy where we can, because we know that even if we got all of the compostable products out, we will still be getting the occasional soda bottle or the occasional whatever it is. And right now we are unable to implement a contamination policy due to the fact that there's so many lookalikes between the approved compostable version and the non-compostable version. And until those are in the same category, we can't implement that. So once we get to that point, there will likely be a differential pricing for what we would then call a contaminated load versus a clean load.
That was all that I had in the chat box, and I don't believe anybody else has their hands up. I am making a slide there real quickly with our contact information, the outreach team's contact information on it that we can throw up on the screen. So if you guys that are on the call are still have questions, or you want to reach out to any of us to ask how to proceed, we are here to lend a hand. So just give me a hot minute here to finish this up.
I see that Robert Meter has a question about Act 148 language changes forthcoming statewide. I don't believe there are any, currently there's no pending language changes in that legislation. People still want to tweak with parts of it, I know. But it does bring up an important point, I think, in that, in Chittenden County, we are the largest compost facility, certainly, and the largest point for disposition of food waste, but it is not the only option. Act 148 legislation, the Universal Recycling Law, mandates that we can't put organics in the landfill, but it doesn't prescribe what to do with them. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that in addition to composting, there are options for feeding animals. There are options for on-site composting. Casella, who's on this call, is about to open a depackaging facility, and it's probable that some portion of their haul routes will end up at their facility and go through this new technology. So there's a lot of change underway and a lot of opportunities, and I encourage you to reach out to the folks at the district who you know, who work with your industry, and find out more about those options.
Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you. Sean Quinn from the Champlain Valley Exposition. I'm the concessions manager, operations manager over there. You know, a lot of information here, and we've been working with CSWD and Robin specifically over the past 2 years to try to implement a program where we thought we could be successful. Again, when you talk about event-based business, the size of ours, you know, on any given weekend night, we could be the second largest city in the state of Vermont type of thing, where we're trying to do the best we can. But in those situations, it's very difficult to ask people to stop and sort. And that's what we're currently doing. With this news, it kind of puts us back to what we've always been doing, which is as good of an effort as we could. But still, I was excited about the possibility that if we could just have all of our concessionaires, and again, all we are is just a huge takeout facility. Everyone is grabbing and, you know, grab and go food. We were going to have all of our concessionaires selling nothing but compostable wares, serving wares, utensils, so on and so forth. And what we were going to basically do is take all of our trash stream and make it one large compostable stream with some recycling. That's the way that I could see things becoming successful. With this news now, I'm not as concerned about, you know, our concessionaires having invested a lot of money in product that they can no longer use. And I realize it's a year, but we're probably a year off anyways from a large fair, you know, anyways. I just get worried about, you know, the eyes on us and what we can and can't do. When the waste warriors are there and we get the help that we can from CSWD, we certainly have some success. But I mean, if we leave it up to our guests on a busy Friday night, I think we can all agree that what we end up with is one large trash stream at the end of the night. Whereas before, we had plans to just have all of our compost go in one bin, really. And we'd have recycling and compost and really eliminate the whole trash stream. We were excited about that. So I get a little concerned about, you know, maybe some repercussions moving forward now that it is, you know, more law and you know, it's under scrutiny a little bit more. I think we're a little unique, and I just want to continue to have those conversations with you folks that, you know, we're doing the best we can, but, you know, when you get 30,000 people congregated over the course of a Saturday afternoon at the fair, it's very hard to make work. And we had a plan in place, and now that plan sort of seems like it's kind of tossed out the window.
Sean, thank you for speaking up and sharing that information. May I ask you, when you mention repercussions, can you elaborate a little bit about that? Are you talking about from your customers or from the state or from us?
Well, I think from I guess many different sources. I would say I think in our discussions, what we had tried to do is we were looking at saying, hey, if the Champlain Valley Fair can do this, then anybody can do it. And we felt really good about, you know, that opportunity. Again, trying to change everything over, and everything we served would be a compostable type material or something that could go to the compost facility.
Right.
So we really wanted to be able to wear that medal on our chest and sort of have people follow suit. It's quite honestly, it's great PR for us.
Yeah.
I worry about that. And then I also worry about, you know, a potential of having CSWD say, hey, look, you know, that you guys just aren't cutting it, and now we could potentially get fined for it. It just makes this job really difficult. Essentially, it's where we are now, really, what we're kind of going back to.
Yeah. Thank you for elaborating on that. That's helpful for us to understand more specifics about your concerns. So I appreciate that. And I can say that, you know, I get it that the expo is certainly, as you said, you know, can be its own little, city, you know, a large city in terms of population and at the size of these events, but you're definitely not alone in the and what you were looking forward to, and being able to implement these tools to shift everything that was going in the trash and making it, you know, both a medal you can wear and be proud of, you know, as a zero waste to landfill, or what you want to call it. So yeah, we get that. I do want to just alleviate some of your concerns about us who are making this change and recognizing we're making that job harder, then turning around and doing some kind of compliance action that's a direct result of this. That's not how we operate. You know, we've been working with the Expo. I started the district in 2009, and our staff has been working with the Expo since before I started. And the goal has always been to try to help get you on board, and staff that predated you. You know, as long as folks are doing their best to try to meet those requirements, and making a really good faith effort at educating staff and customers, that's what we're looking for, you know, and we want to
Gotcha.
help you get there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, a couple of chat questions. So Brittany is asking, how soon will CSWD announce this policy change to the public?
So our original discussion about this, we knew we wanted to reach out to the members of this meeting and key stakeholders first, so that you were aware before your customers and constituents became aware, and you could be prepared for that somewhat. But our plan was to start reaching out to the public in February or soon after that. It's not going to be a one and done kind of thing. It's going to be an ongoing rollout. We know from decades of experience, as well as the rollout of the food scraps final stage of Act 148, that people don't really start paying attention until something's looming. So we would start rolling out the messaging in different ways on our many channels, and ramp it up, you know, as we start getting closer to that January 1 deadline.
All right, and Jeffrey from the Expo wants to know, what conversations, if any, have you had with the state and legislature with regards to these changes?
So if it's specific to our acceptance decisions, though, we've talked with the Solid Waste Division of Agency of Natural Resources, who is the ones who are responsible for overseeing all of the permitting and regulations around compost facilities, recycling facilities, trash facilities, and the like. And they were also responsible for kind of rolling out Act 148. So we've had discussions with them. They're aware. We've not engaged with the legislature on this topic as of yet.
Jennifer.
Hi, Jen Bergeron from University of Vermont Medical Center. Just to piggyback off from, some feedback from Sean and some other people, like many, we switched to a lot of compostware, and compost on average of like 400 tons a month, which is absolutely ridiculous. A lot of that is serveware, a lot of it is food. Based on that, my question, we know that the bioplastics and the different biodegradable material isn't breaking down. So my question to both CSWD and Green Mountain Compost is, what conversations have you guys had with the vendors and the people, the manufacturers making this product, so we can actually be utilizing it and come up with other ideas? Casella, I know, has come up with, and they're building the depackaging facility. But what have you guys done to move this forward so we can still do what's environmentally friendly to the environment and keep moving forward instead of taking steps backwards?
Yeah. So I've been engaged with the industry and giving them feedback for as long as I've been accepting compostable products, which is now coming on 17 years, 18 years. And they are aware of the circumstance. They obviously have motivations that aren't shared by us in this realm, but they also, they do want their materials to break down in compost facilities. That one is shared. And to be clear, it's not that all these products do not break down in our facility. A good portion of them do. And every facility is different. But the problem, it's not just the compost products that don't break down. It's the fact that they're in there, and some of them don't break down, but they also basically are Trojan horse for all of the other non-compostable products that also come in. So it's more than the fact that they don't all degrade the way we would like them to, unfortunately. I think that's one of the hurdles for the composting industry at large, is that there are a lot of facilities where they just don't break down quickly enough, and then they get pulled out and landfilled. So they're aware of that, and I point that out with regularity when I'm talking to them. And same thing, like I see Kelton's got his hand up, but depackaging is another option, but unfortunately it's unlikely that if any materials pulled out of there will then be composted or broken down, they will just be landfilled as well. So it's a tricky one. These products, the industry that produces them keeps making more and more varied version. There's a lot of variety of them. It's growing every day. They are improving formulations, and who knows, 5 years from now, maybe there will be formulations that work in backyard composting readily. Most of these do not, even though a lot of them will break down in our facility. If you put one of those knives or spoons or forks that says compostable on it in your backyard compost, it's going to be there a long time. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's it's an ongoing conversation with them for sure.
Kelton?
I mean, my question would just be, like looking at products like this that some vendors have that maybe aren't those bioplastic, is there a possibility to possibly look at some other option that might not be? Because I mean, I get it. Like I look at these bioplastics, and to me, I totally get it. Like, how do you know the difference between this and this? Like, how do you know which one's compostable? It's extremely difficult. But when you look at some of these cardboard options, like, is there a way to, at least that way, people who are serving the Foodware can still have an option and change their purchasing habits more towards something that your process could handle and would break down quicker?
So I think as folks reach out individually, our outreach and communication staffs are going to go through all sorts of options, hopefully, and help individuals figure out the best one for their circumstance and their institution. We looked into the pressed fiber and other options. Prior to this decision, there was a lot of concern about what to do about molded fiber products in general, because they, as a category, they've kind of lost their certification with BPI in recent months and years because of the fact that they almost all contain fluorinated compounds. So it's a tricky one, and tricky enough that we have included it with the exclusion list. Now, as things change moving forward, 5 years from now, I'm guessing you won't be able to buy pressed fiber materials with fluorinated compounds in them. Hopefully by then they will have solved that one. It's a tricky one because, these things, we want them to degrade, and we also want them to resist liquid and oils and be actually usable in the marketplace. So we will certainly keep our ears open and pay attention to what's going on with all of these. And we're constantly looking out for, how to improve our process and how to integrate with different products and the changing world all around us. But for the moment, those are not on the approved list starting next year either.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, I just look, and like everyone I talk to, all of our customers on a regular basis, everyone wants to do the right thing and find a way that we can capture more material. And obviously, if we now have to throw away the plastic material, I think we know customers aren't going to open up, put one into the compost, one into the trash unless we have someone standing there all day long. That's not a reality of what's going to happen. It's going to all go into the trash, and I just feel like it does feel like a backstep. I totally understand, again, the plastic issue. I mean, I think with a lot of my customers, we've been having this conversation for a long time of, hey, we won't be able to accept this forever. I imagine, like, I think the change was coming up in the future, but just at least maybe finding something that I'm sure, like, and even on this call, we've heard a lot of people have been willing to pay more to do the right thing. And how do we find what the right thing is, and how do we put those resources and make those resources available to them, even if it's bringing in a like a reusable, like UVM has their awesome reusable foodware program. How do we, as haulers, as the district, work together on helping customers put in something like that, maybe as a county-wide solution? Or so, I mean, again, there's a lot of things there, but how do we come up with something so we're not all of a sudden taking all this material we're capturing and throwing it back in the landfill?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Kelton, we welcome those conversations. We want to be a partner in finding those solutions. And in some cases, it's going to be a better solution overall because it's not relying on single-use products that are just using more resources for one-time use, which is never a good solution, no matter where they're ultimately ending up. So yeah, we want to have those conversations for sure.
I just wanted to say something to Jennifer Bergeron as well, as far as the compostable stuff. Like, I'm the school outreach coordinator, so I work with pre-K through college, but like at the K-12 level or pre-K-12 level, if I mean, and a lot of the schools have gone to some compostable plastics that are not clearly marked compostable, but the kids have learned, oh, okay, I can put my yogurt parfait thing into the compost bin. But that goes in, and then next thing you know, it's like filled up with milk cartons because there's just not an understanding the difference between the compostable stuff and like trash. And yeah, some of them are like 5-year-olds doing it, but there's also, middle school and high school kids too. There's just so many different products out there that I've noticed that I've even started teaching my kids to not put napkins and paper towels in the compost and just do strictly food because it just makes such a cleaner break from like trying to get every single person that's going to be using a sorting system without a monitor standing there all the time to get them to put the correct thing in there. So I don't know if that helps at all, but.
No, I think it does help, Rhonda, but it's challenging, and seeing in the middle schools and elementary schools, you see that they are teaching the kids about waste and compost. And I was super excited to have my kids come home and tell me that they were composting at school, especially overseeing waste here at the hospital. But it's challenging because not only just in the compost world, but the recycling world, things change. One minute it's accepted and the next day it's not accepted. And when you have a department of over 200 employees that English is not their first language and you're constantly training them over and over and over, when waste is not our primary job, we're here to serve patients, and there's representatives from other businesses, and waste isn't their primary focus. I can only delegate so much of my time to updating training and touching all of those employees on a regular basis to tell them, yep, our glove boxes are no longer recyclable, or now we can only compost food waste, which, yeah, streamlining that, it makes it a lot easier, right? It's very easy to say only this apple core is recyclable versus all these different containers that we have. It's just an ongoing challenge in the waste industry as a whole. I think it's not just specific to composting. It's just, I think that this one hits hard because, we've all tried to do the right thing. We've spent the money to be, environmentally friendly as much as we can, and now we're going backwards. But it's not specific to this. It's just the ongoing waste challenges within the industry is very challenging, especially since China Black Sword.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that challenge and difficulty and frustration, frankly. And we would love to work further with you, Jennifer, and anyone on your staff. I know I personally have worked with several people at UVMMC, and Ethan Hausman, our business outreach coordinator, also to help really target those areas where there may be continued confusion and ways we can help you streamline and clarify and make it so people don't feel like it's changing all the time, because it really doesn't, but it is a common conception that it does. So happy to help support that.
Do you want me to share our contact information, the outreach team's contact information now, or?
Yes, please. And then it's 3:09. I think this is scheduled till 3:30, but I want to be respectful of people's time and, answer any remaining questions. And again, if there's something, go ahead and share, Rhonda, and I'll just keep talking that if there is a question that you didn't think of that comes to mind, please don't hesitate to send it to one of these three people if it's your sector, or you can always reach us at info@cswd.net. We all have the same format for our emails, so I'm reachable at morris@cswd.net. And we'll be happy to get back to you, or add. What we'll be doing is adding these questions and answers and responses to our Q&As. And again, we'll send information out to you. We'll send a link to download this as soon as we can, as soon as it's available. And then we'll be posting this information on our website, and we'll keep that updated and live. And as we learn more about how to support you and what resources and opportunities there are to help you reach your customers and get the message out, I always want to hear that the best way we can support you and not thwart your efforts going forward.
Similarly, you have my contact information from the letter, but compost@greenmountaincompost.com. That's a little bit different from the rest of the CSWD emails, but happy to respond to questions via that pathway as well. Any other questions that we can try to answer now? We will.
I don't see anything in the chat or elsewhere, so I think maybe we're all set here.
Well, thank you again all for taking time today to participate in this. I know it's not a fun conversation to be having perhaps from some of your perspectives, but hopefully we were able to give you more information about why we came to this difficult decision, and look forward to working with you individually as the year progresses and helping to come up with solutions that are going to work in your institution. Thanks again.
Thank you.